Am I the only one that didn't know the US-Canada trade war has been raging for years? The year is 2025. The trade war between the United States and Canada continues. It began a few years ago, casting a long shadow over both economies. What started as a tariff dispute has escalated into economic sanctions and political maneuvering. Businesses on both sides are grappling with uncertainty. The future of the US-Canada trade relationship hangs in the balance. This ongoing saga has far-reaching consequences. It affects large corporations, small businesses, and individual workers. The flow of goods and services across the world's longest undefended border has been disrupted. The economic integration that has long characterized the US-Canada relationship is being tested. The trade war is a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of the global economy. Actions taken by one country can have ripple effects across the world. In this case, the tariffs and trade barriers imposed by the US have prompted retaliatory measures from Canada. This tit-for-tat approach has created a climate of uncertainty and instability that is harmful to businesses and consumers on both sides of the border. The trade war is not just an economic issue, it is also a political one. It has strained relations between the two countries, and there is no clear end in sight. The outcome of this conflict will have a significant impact on the future of the US-Canada relationship. The trade war began with the US imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from Canada. The US government argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect national security. They claimed that reliance on foreign steel and aluminum made the US vulnerable. Canada, a close ally and trading partner, was caught off guard by this move. The Canadian government viewed the tariffs as unfair and protectionist. They argued that Canada was not a threat to US national security. In fact, Canada has long been a reliable supplier of steel and aluminum to the US. The Canadian government felt that the tariffs were a way for the US to give its own domestic industries an unfair advantage. The initial impact of the tariffs was felt by businesses in both countries. Canadian steel and aluminum producers faced higher costs to export their products to the US. Some companies were forced to lay off workers or scale back production. In the US, businesses that relied on Canadian steel and aluminum also faced higher costs. This led to increased prices for consumers. The imposition of tariffs marked a turning point in US-Canada trade relations. It signaled a shift towards protectionism and away from the free trade policies that had long characterized the relationship. This move created uncertainty and anxiety among businesses and investors on both sides of the border. The economic fallout from the trade war has been significant for both countries. In Canada, tariffs have hurt the steel and aluminum industries, leading to job losses. The uncertainty has made businesses hesitant to invest and expand. In the US, tariffs have led to higher prices for consumers and businesses. This has hurt many companies' bottom lines. The trade war has disrupted supply chains. The broader impact has dampened economic growth in both countries. Canada responded to the US tariffs with a two-pronged approach: retaliation and diplomacy. The Canadian government imposed retaliatory tariffs on a range of US goods, targeting products from states that were politically important to the US administration. This was a calculated move to apply pressure while minimizing self-harm. Simultaneously, Canada engaged in diplomatic efforts to resolve the dispute. Prime Minister Trudeau and his cabinet ministers maintained open lines of communication with their US counterparts. They stressed the importance of the bilateral trade relationship and the need for a negotiated settlement. Canada also sought to rally international support for its position. The government argued that the US tariffs violated international trade rules and set a dangerous precedent. Canada found allies in other countries that were also subject to US tariffs. Canada's response to the trade war was marked by a combination of firmness and pragmatism. The government was resolute in defending Canada's interests while remaining open to dialogue. This balanced approach garnered public support as Canadians rallied behind their government in the face of US pressure. British Columbia takes a stand. British Columbia, Canada's westernmost province, found itself on the front lines of the trade war. With a robust economy deeply integrated with the United States, BC felt the impact of the tariffs acutely. The province's lumber industry, a major exporter to the US, was particularly vulnerable. In response, BC implemented its own retaliatory measures. Premier David Eby, a staunch advocate for BC's interests, took a tough stance against the US tariffs. He implemented tolls on US commercial vehicles traveling through BC to Alaska, targeting a vital supply route for the United States. Furthermore, BC enacted legislation mandating the use of Canadian low-carbon fuel additives. This move disadvantaged U.S. fuel producers and demonstrated BC's commitment to environmental sustainability while promoting Canadian industries. Premier Eby's actions sent a clear message: BC would not stand idly by while its economy was under attack. His decisive leadership resonated with British Columbians, who voiced their support for the province's strong stance against the U.S. tariffs. A nation's response: strategies for survival. Beyond retaliatory tariffs, Canada adopted a multifaceted approach to weather the storm of the trade war. The federal government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Trudeau, implemented a series of measures to support affected industries and diversify trade relationships. Financial aid packages were provided to businesses and workers in hard-hit sectors, particularly steel and aluminum. These measures aimed to cushion the blow of the tariffs and prevent widespread job losses. The government also increased funding for export development programs, encouraging Canadian businesses to explore new markets and reduce their reliance on the United States. Recognizing the need to reduce its dependence on the U.S. market, Canada actively pursued trade diversification. New trade agreements were negotiated with countries in Europe, Asia, and Latin America, opening up new markets for Canadian goods and services. The government also invested heavily in infrastructure projects, such as ports and railways, to facilitate trade with these new partners. Canada's response to the trade war went beyond short-term damage control. It represented a strategic shift towards a more diversified and resilient economy, less reliant on any single trading partner. This approach aimed to strengthen Canada's position in the global marketplace and mitigate the impact of future trade disputes. The price of discord: counting the costs. The trade war has come at a steep cost for both Canada and the United States. Businesses on both sides of the border have faced increased operating costs due to the tariffs, forcing them to raise prices or absorb losses. Consumers have felt the pinch as well, experiencing higher prices for a wide range of goods, from cars and appliances to groceries and clothing. The uncertainty generated by the trade war has stifled economic growth. Businesses have been hesitant to make long-term investments, fearing further escalation or sudden policy changes. This hesitancy has slowed job creation and hampered economic expansion in both countries. The trade war has also damaged the long-standing friendship between Canada and the United States. The dispute has strained diplomatic relations and eroded trust between the two countries. This erosion of goodwill has made it more difficult to address other bilateral issues such as border security and environmental cooperation. The costs of the trade war extend beyond economics. The dispute has fueled nationalist sentiment and created divisions within both countries. This polarization has made it more challenging to find common ground and reach a mutually agreeable solution. An uncertain future. Navigating the path ahead. As the trade war drags on, the path forward remains uncertain. While there have been periods of relative calm and attempts at negotiation, a lasting resolution seems elusive. The deeply intertwined nature of the United States and Canadian economies makes disentangling the dispute a complex and delicate task. Both countries face difficult choices. Continuing the trade war risks further economic damage and a lasting chill in bilateral relations. However, backing down could be perceived as weakness and embolden further protectionist measures. Finding a way out of the trade war requires a commitment to dialogue, compromise, and a recognition of the interconnectedness of the two economies. Both sides must be willing to make concessions and prioritize the long-term health of the bilateral relationship over short-term political gains. The future of the U.S.-Canada trade relationship hangs in the balance. The outcome of this dispute will have far-reaching consequences for both countries and for the global trading system as a whole. The world watches, hoping for a swift and amicable resolution to this damaging trade war.